The first time my mailbox shattered, it sounded like a gunshot in the quiet of the morning. I was halfway through pouring coffee when the crack echoed down the street, followed by the crunch of plastic and metal skidding across asphalt. I didn't even need to look. I already knew who it was. Karina, president of the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association, self-appointed guardian of curb appeal, and the woman who had decided that my mailbox was a personal insult to her existence. I moved to Oak Hollow for peace. That was the lie I told myself. The truth was simpler and sadder. I needed somewhere quiet to heal. After the divorce, after selling the house that had once been full of noise and promises, I wanted a place where nothing asked too much of me. Oak Hollow looked perfect. Tree-lined streets, modest homes, a little creek at the edge of the neighborhood where kids skipped stones, and an HOA that, on paper, claimed to value community harmony. I learned quickly that harmony meant obedience. The mailbox was the first offense. It wasn't broken, it wasn't leaning, it wasn't neon pink or shaped like a dragon. It was solid wood, dark-stained, hand-built by my father before he passed. He made it in his garage, sanding it smooth while telling stories about how the postman once delivered love letters by hand. When I installed it, it felt like planting a small piece of him in front of my new life. Karen saw it and frowned like she tasted something sour. The letter came 2 days later. Mailbox not compliant with HOA guidelines, replaced within 7 days. No explanation, no guideline attached, just a threat of fines. I emailed back, politely asking what part wasn't compliant. The reply came an hour later, curt and cold. Material and aesthetic not approved. I tried to compromise. I offered to paint it. I offered to submit photos. I even offered to attend the next home meeting. Karen didn't respond. Then, one morning, the mailbox exploded. I stood in the driveway staring at the wreckage while my neighbor Tom jogged over, breathless and angry. He told me he'd seen Karen's SUV swerve toward the curb and clip the post hard enough to send splinters flying. She didn't even slow down, he said. Just kept going. I reported it, filed a police report, sent photos. Karen replied that it must have been an accident, that the road was narrow, that perhaps my mailbox was improperly placed. They fined me for debris left curbside. That was when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. I replaced the mailbox with the standard one from the hardware store. Plain, approved, ugly in a way that made me feel like I was giving up. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I started to breathe again. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening, I heard the sound of metal on metal this time and watched from the window as the new mailbox bent and tore free under the bumper of Karen's SUV. She didn't stop. Again, something in me cracked, but it wasn't anger. It was resolve. I was tired of shrinking, tired of pretending that keeping the peace meant letting myself be bullied. I fixed the mailbox again, and I started documenting everything. Dates, times, photos, witnesses. I installed a camera. Discreet but clear. Karen escalated. She sent letters about my lawn height, my trash can placement, the color of my porch light. Each one felt like a reminder she could touch my life whenever she wanted. And then, 3 weeks later, she smashed the mailbox again. This time, the camera caught everything. The deliberate swerve, the pause, just a second too long to be accidental. The way she looked straight at the house before driving off. I brought the footage to the HOA board. Karen shared the meeting. She smiled through my presentation, dismissed the video as inconclusive, and suggested that perhaps I was targeting her unfairly. The board nodded along, uncomfortable but compliant. When the meeting ended, Karen leaned close and whispered, "Just replace it with something approved. This doesn't have to be hard." I went home and sat in the quiet, staring at the empty post by the curb. My father's voice echoed in my head, the way it did when I was a kid and something seemed impossible. "If it keeps breaking," he'd say, "maybe you're building the wrong thing." That night, I made a different plan. The new mailbox arrived a week later. It was approved. All right. Approved by engineers, approved by the city, approved by common sense. From the outside, it looked simply sleek steel, neutral color, no ornamentation, HOA compliant to the letter. Karen even slowed down one afternoon to inspect it, lips pursed, clearly disappointed she had nothing to complain about. What she didn't know was what lay beneath. The mailbox was anchored into a reinforced concrete footing, deeper than the city required. Inside the post was a steel cord, the kind used for traffic barriers. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't illegal. It was, quite simply, immovable. I'd checked every regulation, every code. I wasn't fighting dirty. I was fighting smart. The day it happened, I was watering the lawn. Karen's SUV came down the street faster than usual, engine growling like it always did when she was in a hurry to make someone else miserable. I saw the swerve start, saw the familiar angle of aggression. I didn't move. The impact was thunderous, but this time, the mailbox didn't budge. Karen's SUV came to a dead stop, steam hissing from the crumpled hood. The mailbox stood there, unmarked, like it had always belonged. The silence afterward was absolute, broken only by Karen's scream as she slammed her hands against the steering wheel. Neighbors poured out of their houses. Phones came up. Someone laughed, then stopped, shocked at themselves. Karen stepped out, shaking, and started yelling about property damage, about lawsuits, about how I'd sabotaged the street. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The police arrived. Reports were filed. Footage was reviewed. Witnesses spoke. For the first time, Karen couldn't talk her way out of it. Her insurance covered my mailbox. Her license got points. And the HOA, suddenly very interested in liability, suspended her from the board pending an investigation. A week later, a letter arrived, a naughty fine, not a threat, an apology. It was stiff and formal, but it acknowledged wrongdoing and promised restitution. Karen resigned shortly after. The whole guidelines were revised to include protections against harassment. A few neighbors knocked on my door, sheepish, admitting they'd been afraid to speak up before. I rebuilt my father's mailbox, not at the curb, but by the front porch. It didn't need to face the street anymore. The new mailbox stayed where it was, solid and quiet, doing its job without asking permission. On this first morning after everything settled, I poured my coffee and listened. No crash, no crunch, just birds and the soft hum of a neighborhood waking up. For the first time since I'd moved in, I felt like I belonged, not because I'd obeyed, but because I'd stood my ground. Sometimes the thing you replace isn't just an object, it's the part of yourself that learned to bend too easily. And when you build that part stronger, when you anchor it deep and make sure it's solid all the way down, you find that not only does it stop breaking, you stop breaking too.